It seems like we're going to experience a massive shakeup in the Constructors' Championship from 2026 on, with Honda potentially linking up with one of Mercedes' customer companies. Aston Martin has shown immense progress in 2023, and although you might think it's a bit of a far-fetched scenario for them to leave Mercedes at this point in their existence, this is very likely to happen. If it turns out that the Silverstone-based squad is ready to commit to the relationship with the Japanese brand, the Silver Arrows will be severely affected by this decision by their top-performing customer company. Mercedes is earning a lot of money by selling its engine to other teams, such as McLaren, Aston Martin and Williams. This way, the company generates money to pay for the cost of producing that engine and earns a profit, money that can be well used towards developing new technologies and upgrades that the Brackley-based squad desperately needs right now. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Mercedes being worried about the new moves that Aston Martin has made, and we'll get to the bottom of it later in this video. First, let's analyze how realistic it is for Honda and Aston Martin to make a link between each other, and then talk about the massive consequences that will have for the Silver Arrows. Honda was reported to leave the sport from 2026 onwards, given the fact that their hot and cold games with Red Bull eventually got the Austrian squad tired and they decided to build their own engines. From 2026 on, Red Bull will run its own powertrains, and by that time Honda will have lent its intellectual property, so technically they're still involved with the sport. However, the Austrian team signed a contract with Ford to badge their engines in the new era of the sport, one that will see an even bigger electrification being implemented. So while Honda was adamant as to whether or not they should remain in the sport, the recent success with Red Bull is definitely more than luring for them to keep providing engines to at least one team on the grid. While starting their own team has also been put out there as a rumor, the pain that Honda would have to go through to achieve this scenario is immense, so it would be the best thing for them to provide the already proven F1 engine to a team that's delivering good results on the track. As we can see so far from 2023, no team is matching the tempo of the Raging Bulls, and a huge part of that goes to Honda's superiority, so they wouldn't settle for a team that would embarrass them, similar to what McLaren did in those 2 years together. Although, to be fair, it was mostly Honda's fault due to the reliability of their engines from 2015 to 2017, but that's a story for another video. Aston Martin is a team that was able to outperform the company they purchased engines from, Mercedes. You don't see this happening very often, but it did happen in the past, given the fact that Red Bull was the team that outperformed Renault even though they bought the engines from the French manufacturer. Now, with Aston Martin holding second place in the Constructors' Championship and progressing fast by hiring people from Red Bull such as Dan Fellows and more than 30 engineers, the next logical thing for them would be to hire the engine manufacturer that was responsible for Red Bull's success, right? But the entire story is very complex, and one fact that goes into this narrative is that it's not just the engine that Aston Martin is purchasing from Mercedes, far from it. Basically, 50% of the AMR23, the name of 2023's challenger, is purchased from the Silver Arrows, such as the rear suspension and the wings as well. This is something that the team has struggled with in their races, as the rear suspension and the gearbox that they have from Mercedes aren't suiting the concept of the AMR23, one that draws inspiration from Red Bull's 2022 challenger. While Aston Martin and Mercedes have a great collaboration outside of the sport in terms of marketing and producing supercars, that isn't the picture that's translated in Formula 1. The sport is an evil place to live, and if you aren't able to deliver the results asked of you, then you're definitely getting eaten by the sharks. If I were to say one thing about Lawrence Stroll, it's that he is one of the fiercest sharks out there, and what he's done with Aston Martin in the short span of just one winter break is amazing, but he doesn't plan to stop there. Now that they've made a massive jump in performance, obviously the next goal would be to win races and therefore compete for championships sooner rather than later. If I'm being honest, I don't think this is achievable with Mercedes' gearbox and engine, and although it wouldn't make sense outside of F1 for this contract between Honda and Aston Martin to happen, this is very likely to be the outcome of the whole scenario, one in which Mercedes would be left without their top-performing customer company. What is also giving us a lot of hope that this will see the light of day is the fact that although Honda was told to leave the sport after Red Bull's tenure, they've still signed for the engine manufacturing program from 2026 onwards, meaning that they're eligible to build engines for whatever team they can find a market in. Yes, again, they can start their own team, but the logistics, costs, and the most important thing, the license, would be such a pain to go through, which only points in one direction: Honda finding a customer company that they'll sell a proven product to. Obviously, there would be some bridges that needed to be crossed, such as Alonso's take on the entire thing. He was present with McLaren back in the days when Honda supplied the Woking-based squad with their engines, a project that turned out to be fatally wrong for both sides. Alonso has been constantly criticizing the Japanese manufacturer, saying that they did nothing but provide a GP2 engine to their car. For things to be more hurtful, he said that on their home race in Japan in 2015. However, there is a twist to this story. Alonso may not be racing for Aston Martin by the time the contract is signed. The two-time world champion has a 3-year contract with Aston Martin that expires at the end of 2025, and I don't see him going further and racing beyond 45. Does he have it in himself? Yes, he does, but will he be the right choice for Aston Martin, as they will have a pool of talents that will be eager to sit next to Lance Stroll, who is very unlikely to leave the team as long as his dad is ruling it? No, I don't think he's the right choice. What does this mean for Mercedes? Obviously, they're going to lose one of their top customer companies, and the Silver Arrows were known as one of the most reliable teams when it comes to engine manufacturing and providing it to other constructors on the grid. This move would definitely hurt them in the long term, given the fact that Aston Martin performing perfectly well with Honda would only mean one thing: Mercedes has lost the benchmark as the best engine manufacturer in the world. It's been like that for the past 2 seasons, but we sincerely hope that this will change beyond 2026 and Red Bull will be challenged for the lead. Because as all things stand right now, the Austrian machinery led by the Japanese engine behind their backs doesn't seem to be stopping very soon. So, is this scenario too far from happening? Obviously, there's quite a bit of logic behind this move from Aston Martin. Lawrence Stroll has been all over the team's heads, asking when the first win will be delivered and when Alonso or Stroll will stand on the highest spot on the podium. No matter how much they upgrade the car in a fair and square race until 2026, the mechanical aspect of Aston Martin is what needs to change so that they will be able to compete with Red Bull. It would be copying their moves, but Formula One is a sport in which if you cannot create your own greatness, borrowing the intellectual property of the team that's been doing so in your place is definitely the way to go. With this move by Aston Martin, there is a huge chance that it will attract a vast amount of engineers to their camp, both from Mercedes and Red Bull. So, on top of taking money from the Silver Arrows by not purchasing engines and gearboxes from them, they will also take away some intellectual property such as high-profile engineers and leaders. All in all, things don't seem to stand very well for Mercedes right now, and if they don't get back on track with their performance, they're about to lose the top-performing branch from their engine, resulting in a massive financial hit for the Brackley-based squad.